Don't you know that from coast to coast, where there's dope, there's hope, where there's dope, there's hope. Sheesh. Wait, is it lit?
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls,
cats and dogs,
welcome to the Herbal Tea Lounge, an interview series with your boys EarthTone
and your man, the real PZs. You're ready.
And we got a very, very, very special guest for you guys. This is our debut interview. And, you know, we decided to do this series because a lot of people have been asking about it, but we wanted to make sure we sat down with somebody worth speaking to. And this is definitely somebody who you guys are going to enjoy. I'm going to let my man PZ bring him in and introduce our very special guest for the day.
Yes, sir. Today we're featuring the illustrious James Felton Keith II, a.k.a. JFK, engineer and serial entrepreneur with a platform known as Inclusionism. I met him during Pride last year, but I've been hearing about this man's name since 2017, believe it or not. Who would, yes, absolutely.
Ringing bells.
Ringing bells out here in these streets, you already know. Who would have thought that we would do a complete 180, and this is where we are right now, a year later. Yeah. So, you know, thanks for joining us. Now, last year you launched your campaign for the House of Representatives seat of the 13th Congressional District of New York, currently held by Adriana Espaillat. Talk to us about the status of your campaign and what's next.
Oh, man. Well, the campaign was going pretty smoothly up until February. I got really sick and sort of went out of commission for a good 5 weeks. And then I'm still about 95%. I think about the 5 weeks after that, I was in a pretty bad place and lost a few people, some campaigners, some family members were sick. My mother was hospitalized. We lost a few people in the building. And it just seemed like, you know, COVID-19 made me sort of reassess life and what was important. And while I felt like, you know, I was letting down a lot of people by not, you know, running strong into the finish line, we just recently suspended the campaign last week. That said, we did make the ballot. So I think people are still going to go out and vote for us on June 23rd. Which is the state primary. It also includes the presidential primary. But, you know, we can't control what's going on always in the world. And so I'm looking forward to living to fight another day. So the campaign is, funny enough, growing. A lot more people are coming to the website and volunteering. But the thing is, this is really the time where people figure out who candidates are through March and May, and then in June. And then we vote. At least that's how we do it in New York, right? So we thought we'd get a lot more fanfare. You know, I had 2 interviews coming up, you know, on the regular news, you know, and everyone's like, "What are you going to tell them?" I was like, "Well, I'm going to tell them, you know, what the fight is right now, you know, and the fight is around economic inclusion. It's around, you know, all of these murders that have been going on around the country. They just murdered another guy in Louisville, Kentucky during a protest. We are not talking about that.
I just heard about that, actually.
Right. So, you know, so the campaign team is growing, but no, we suspended the campaign for 2020. We're looking forward to 2022. But more importantly, I'm looking forward to sort of the things that we expect to get changed. I've been arguably the number one, you know, lobbyist from a data and cyber standpoint on the planet. And we plan to still change a lot of laws with a lot of the new political capital that we have, just, you know, being in this race and being in the game. So, you know, we're going to take a breather, check on the family. We got a march coming up here in Harlem tomorrow for George Floyd's funeral.
Super facts.
Yeah, so, you know, we got stuff going on for sure. But, you know, we won't be on the ground campaigning like we were at the beginning of the year over the course of the next 3 weeks. And so I'm a little embarrassed by you. I regret to say it. I don't even know how to answer your question. I'm like, well,
You
we can't.
know, I don't think you should be embarrassed. I think you mobilized me to actually see what's going on,
Hmm.
uh, government wise, at least locally in the state, and definitely federally. So I just applaud you and I thank you for
Thank you.
just opening doors, because you would have been, or you are, one of the first LGBT POCs who would have been able to get that seat. And I think just
Yeah.
you running is definitely a big step for us.
Absolutely.
And it's definitely to be commended. And I thank you so much for just embracing all this energy that's around you, and opening that platform.
Yeah.
And
So
let's not skate over the corona. Like COVID is no joke. Like it's the
it
real
really
deal. Like
is,
that shit is out
and
here killing people. So for you
that's
to have,
true.
survived it, gone through the loss of people who have succumbed to it, it's not easy. And then to still be able
Yeah,
to pick up the pieces and get back out there and figure it out and keep moving forward, we
Yeah.
definitely commend that. We need more of it. I mean, we're getting hit from every angle right now, and it's not easy. It's
absolutely.
never been easy, but I don't believe I've ever seen it like this. And it always makes me
No.
think about like the youth. Like we're used to it. We've seen this before in some way, shape, or form, but it's kids out there who are just coming of age, coming in
Hmm.
18, 19 years old, figuring out who they are. And they're
Yeah.
seeing this, and there's no escaping it. The internet is everywhere. Social media is everywhere. You have to see this. So it's going to be very interesting to see how we come up out of this, being that everybody feels it. Everybody has to see it. Everybody has to deal with it in some way, shape, or form. So hopefully,
Absolutely.
man, it's going to lead to better days. But we
Yeah.
commend you for being out here and being in the forefront. I mean, a lot of people out here who haven't experienced COVID are scared to get out there and go march. So for you to be, a part of something like that is a big, big
They did
It's a
testament to
tell me.
you.
big deal.
They did tell me. No, I appreciate it. They did tell me. So I had another test, and then I had the antibodies test. So I came up negative as of last week,
Mm,
and my antibodies came back showing I do have antibodies, and so apparently I was fighting it internally. Now that doesn't mean that I can't catch it again.
mm,
We don't know, but things are just so dire. We got to
Hmm.
do something. And
yeah.
actually, to y'all's point, I was on a conference call, back when everything was running smoothly with a dance company, and they had a bunch of different dancers there, but one of them was 15 years old, and
Mm,
she was just like, where's the world going? Like, is this it? Is it over? I just got here. And I can't even imagine. When I was 15, everything was, I was 15 in 95, and everything was cool. I was just worried about if I was going to get a car that year. You know,
And
that
then
was it.
even if it
Oh, yeah.
wasn't, you ain't have a
Yeah.
phone telling you like, oh, this is what's
Oh,
going
yeah,
on.
none
Da,
of
da, da,
that.
da. You know what I mean?
None of that.
Yeah.
We didn't
Yeah.
even have a beeper because our neighbors would tell my mother that we were drug dealers if we had one. I did have one, and I would just put a battery in it to tell time.
It wasn't activated.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
wasn't activated.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
That was back then. But the other thing that was in that meeting was, there was a bunch of guys, young guys, gay and bi guys who danced with like Harlem Dance Company and Elisa Monte Dance Company, and they introduced me to all these artists who are really leading this march tomorrow. So
Mm,
these are folks who I would say aren't in the political class, if that's a phrase. So the political
Hmm.
class are people in politics, we call them triple primes. They always vote. We have data on them. We know where they live, how to contact them. But the largest voting class are people who don't vote at all. And so
mm.
these guys, they make suits for like famous people, D.L. Hewley and Prince and all these folks. And they live right here in the neighborhood. And they reached out like, we want to have a march of 100 men in suits. I was like, we can do better than 100.
Mm.
Just let us tell some politicians about it and some other folks. I was like, but we won't, hijack your movement. And they were like, well, yeah, we don't mind people speaking. I was like, no, really, we want to follow you. I mean, I'm gonna come say something because we linked up with them, but we
Yeah.
want to follow them because we want that group to stay engaged. Like, these are the cool people from Instagram, and their pictures look great. And when they talk about politics, a new group of folks are listening than
Mm-hmm.
those of us who are already involved. So it is like, you know, PZ and Company, it's the cool kids who are like, I want to play now. And when I talk to any of them, I just try to tell folks, look, this is about power. And if you ever thought about power and being powerful, this is raw power. Like you can wave a wand or wave a pen and change the way the world works. And if that ain't grand, I don't know what it is. So I think that's the work, is telling people, yeah, you're supposed to be this powerful, you know?
Yeah.
Supposed to be in play. And they starting to take it, you know? And these protests are adding to that, because that's a new group that we get to now try to target and communicate to. So I'm really, as dire as it is, I'm excited about that, you know. And if I die walking from 125th Street to 96, but, you know, 20 new cats are out here participating, you know, I'm exhausted. So.
Yeah.
You know I'm gonna hold you down. You already know, 10 toes. It is what it is.
Next. When I drop at 96, you're gonna come right back up.
Fuck the bullshit. We gonna make all the tribute songs, all the videos.
Get it in. You know what I'm saying? Get it in.
We ain't just doing white tees, all of that shit.
Be immortalized.
Would be immortal. All right, so here we go. We're talking about your campaign, and you've done so much to create the momentum, at least in my eyes. What can we really do to keep that momentum going? Like, you already know I'm there 2022, I'm there 2024, I'm there 2030, whatever. So, but everybody else coming up behind, and we want to make sure that this message that you're putting out continues to reverberate, not just now because election year, but it keeps going. And that's my real big thing. So what could we do to continue the work that you started, to continue the momentum that you've already began?
I think it comes back to, this is going to sound cliche, but I'll get into the details of how we actually do it. We just got to continue to organize, right? So at my core, I consider myself a process engineer. So I'm an organizer by training. Process engineers, they just sort of look at the world in boxes and vectors and say what fits where. So I usually just come in and try to organize organizers. If there's somebody with a passion for something, I say, well, here's how you make it better. Here's how you make it an institution, right? Like I did a march, and I think a good example is this. I was interacting with a bunch of universal basic income activists who had their biannual conference, like a continental conference. It's called the North American Basic Income Guarantee Conference. And they met right here in Harlem, in East Harlem, at the Silberman School, which is a CUNY university, right over on 2nd, right, and like 118th Street. And it was all these activists, you know, they're nerding out about basic income and why we should have it, why we deserve it, why we're owed it. But I just tried to appeal to them and say, look, we should march. And they're like, well, what is a march going to do? Marches don't do anything. And these are comfortable people. These ain't the streets per se, but they care about folks in the street. But I got introduced to them by some homeless activists who were previously homeless and now, you know, do different jobs. And I was like, look, if we march, it's spiritual. It's about like, you can feel the people, you come together. And so I convinced them to do a march last October. And we did it right up here on 145th and marched from Harlem over into the Bronx, the two poorest neighborhoods in New York City, with, you know, Central Brooklyn not far behind, and Jamaica Queens not far behind that. But anyway, you know, everywhere the Black people live. But the deal is, after that, a whole organization proliferated called the Income Movement. They have 60,000 members now. They're raising money a lot. And my work is really just about, if I can find people with passions that I can convince to create an institution, and we're in a good place. Because I think too often what our people do, whether they're, you know, creative or have a business mind or some sort of skill set, is they don't look at themselves as having the potential of building a big institution, but they totally can.
Yeah.
So again, it's just, that's my skill set though, right? I'm just an engineer, you know. I went to B school, and so my formal training is very much so around how would you engineer a company to exist. So I just meet people who I think would make great companies, and I try to build a box around them that other people can pour into. And so when I say the way we keep it going is we have to keep organizing, we will do exactly that. Like, we're gonna do this march tomorrow. We're gonna do more stuff in the income space. We're gonna do more stuff in the housing and healthcare space. We're gonna do more stuff, again, in the LGBT space. Like, I just joined the board of World Pride, And they didn't have anything Black on the agenda. But to their credit, they said, well, the reason we wanted you to come in, World Pride is in Denmark, in Copenhagen next year. And they were like, we know what we don't have, and we need you to tell us. So we brought a coalition of people. We built a Black lesbian conference that's going to be happening there. So you have like African lesbians, and Black American lesbians, you name it. I'm not a big fan. Right. Yeah, African American. I just do Black, but whatever people like, it'll be there. So we'll have like the Black lesbian faction, the Black trans faction, the Black men's faction. We'll invite a guy who runs a conference here called Depressed Gay Black Men, which is a big conference in the healthcare space. But they'll do it at World Pride now. So we'll be on that stage. And again, it's just about organizing. We took a lot of the organizers here and said, look, do you want to be on the international stage where everybody is thinking about how you do your stuff? And it's not just the white people in Copenhagen, it's, the people in the Middle East and the people in Asia and the people in South America who don't have anywhere close to the rights that we have as hard as they are. So that's just the work. And so we're going to do that. That's, every now and again, we'll take a hit. I'll crawl up under the bed and cry about it. And then in 2 days, I come back out and, we act like nothing is wrong. I still got a whole lot of that sort of toxic masculinity going on. I'll bottle stuff up and get work done.
You gotta harness it. It's like any other power tool. You got to use it the right way, or it'll bite you in the ass.
Right. I'm trying to get good with that now. Right. Like you're gonna go. Maybe you're a little depressed. Maybe you're a little sad. Maybe you're a little tired.
We all have to be at this point. It has to be some kind of PSD or some PTSD. Something. We
all been going through it. All of us have it.
Yeah, absolutely.
We all have it.
That's a part of not being able to escape it. But with that being said, you mentioned your skill set. Would you consider running for president? And if you would, what would be the focus of your campaign?
I haven't considered anything like that, but we playing what I do.
Yeah.
If I ran for president, look, I think the role of a politician is not just, especially if you're the executive. So if you're president or a governor or a mayor, right? That's different than being a legislator, right? So I think first things first, it's necessary to recognize that politics is about power, not policy. Policy is a secondary thing. And a lot of times you can judge the character of people you're dealing with by the policies that they advocate for. But politics is about power first. And when you're the executive, different from being in the legislature of any sort, whether you're a U.S. senator or state senator or U.S. congressman or state assembly member or state rep or city council member, the role is really as sort of a moral leader. So the role is really about reconciliation. And I think the biggest opportunity we have in a country like this, or even on a global stage, is to reconcile what harm's done to people, not only economically, but socially, politically, technologically. But I think the way you make a peace offering, if you're going to reconcile, is it has to be with something tangible. So the first thing I would be advocating for is a guaranteed equity stake. And that's different than just a standard income. It's different than just like a standard check. But I would first be advocating for everyone having an ownership stake in America. So if you live here and you make our neighborhoods different for whatever reason, you're a homeless guy that sleeps on the subway, or you're the executive that lives in a high rise, whatever it is, you make the character of our neighborhood what it is. If a comedian comes out and tells jokes about Harlem, they got executive jokes and they got homeless people jokes, and all of them might be offensive, but all of them are probably funny to somebody. And those people's input of their culture, their essence, their being in that place makes them valuable. In fact, they have an intrinsic value. So the first thing I would do, like the lead off of, if I had a platform, if I was running for president, it would be very specific to guaranteeing people's income and trying to convince them that they have some valuable input to society and that they're owed a payback from that.
So if I'm not mistaken, it's similar to like looking at America pretty much as a company, a business. You're the CEO and you're giving the citizens stock in their company.
Right, exactly. That's exactly what I got from it.
I think it's sort of like a dance between a church and a company. So what we want people to believe, and they should. I think people should believe in people. I don't believe we are the blind or leading blind people.
Yeah.
You know, I believe in people. Like I'm down to do the podcasts and the marches, etc. Because I like people. I like how they look. I like how they sweat. I like how they smell. Even when it ain't great, I can sense them. I know them. I know that they're there. So half of the job is saying, in this trust, in this church that we have called America, called New York, called whatever, you are valuable. It's like when a preacher says you have favor. But when I say you have favor, to go to the corporate side, I'll say, I can prove it to you on a spreadsheet. Like I can show you that favor, and I can make it a number, and I can put it in your bank account, and I can make sure that you can live a dignified life because you're a part of our church. You're a part of our trust. You're a part of our corporation. And so what I'm saying is, as you are a member, a citizen, a provider of input to our collective value, you should be able to live a dignified life via the healthcare you receive, the housing you have, and being able to go out and buy stuff that you need, and not just basic goods, right? I'm not just talking about saran wrap and toilet paper. You know, if, you know, y'all might buy different stuff. You know, somebody might have a kid, you be like, I want to buy a crazy birthday cake, because that's how I get down for my kids.
Yeah.
You should be able to do that. So I think the platform will look very much so like inclusionism, right? So my core philosophy is really just based on three principles. The idea that people have an intrinsic value first, that they only derive that value from each other second, which I think is a bit controversial to some folks at least. And thirdly, that they're entitled to or owed some equity in the value that comes from those interactions. And to be clear, it's not an attack on any old religions or anything. It's really just, it's a physics analogy. So as an engineer, I don't like anything that doesn't have a good physics analogy, because if it doesn't, that means it probably doesn't exist, right? So when I say you have intrinsic value, I mean, I can show you that, again, on a spreadsheet. You know, as you all bounce up against each other, you all are arguably different people after doing the podcast together, just because of whatever works or whatever you picking up from each other. But we could see that transaction in data if we wanted to.
Yeah.
That's number one. So the value is evident, it is intrinsic, and I can prove it because we have data now. That's number one. Number two, when I say we only derive our value from each other, I mean, we are the ones who say that the other people exist and therefore are good and have an intrinsic value. If we existed in an empty white space with no friction, then nothing would happen in that space and no energy would proliferate. So for the second principle, I'm really saying value is like that of energy. It cannot be created or destroyed, but it can change form. Most people learn that in the third grade about energy. So if you take particles and you move them, they have friction. And from that friction, energy proliferates. And everything moves on energy. Energy is a real thing. It's a tangible thing. It's not a, fictional, ideological, abstract thing. Now, if we move to value, data is just like those particles. And the transaction of it is just like that friction. And so when that happens, value proliferates almost inherently, just like energy does. So I'm saying it is a fact that you all only have your value because you exist here together. And then third, the most significant political piece, I think, is that you're entitled to some equity on that value that proliferates, or some energy that proliferates from that friction. If the two of you are making friction in a podcast or whatever, but one person is taking all the value from it, it's a problem. Now, that doesn't mean that in some situations, like if you look at some of these companies, I'm never saying that the boss isn't worth twice as much as the employees, but you're not worth 500 times as much. You're not worth 253 times as much, which is what the CEO of General Motors is worth per her employees. That's ridiculous. You could be super rich and make decisions about your company or about your institution with 10 times as much value as people. You still be able to get places faster because you're a more critical person to be in certain situations. We get that. But there is a point where it's excessive. And we've gotten to the point in humanity where we forgot that the only reason that we are good is because everybody else is pouring into us. you know. So that would be the platform. It would be about, you know, radical inclusion, heavy-handed inclusion. That's the next thing. I'm writing my next book on that. So my next book is called Inclusionism. But I've been, you know, because of, coronavirus and, you know, the protests, I've been depleted, man.
Yeah, can imagine.
I owed my my publisher a book on the 1st, 2 days ago, and they're like, "What's up?" And I was like, "I'm back. I don't know. Like, I'm gonna let you know."
Well, where you at with it? How far in are you, or did you start, or where you at?
Yeah, no. So I mean, so inclusionism is a framework. My radio show is about it. You know, it's just a matter of
just putting it, packaging it.
It's some work. It's some hours to write through how that book is gonna go. Tell you the truth, though, I was talking to a musician that I met at Afropunk years ago, before it was like a cool thing. This must have been like 2011. And I hit him up. His name is Sinkane, with a K, Sinkane. And I was like, yo, I would love to drop an EP of inclusionism. Not like, I'm not musical per se, but if I'm talking about these principles over tracks, I was like, you know, if we dropped a 10-track EP and everything was less than 5 minutes, I think people could digest that better than a book. You know, we'll write the book, but I'm not one of those people who's like, you know, in my head about, you know, how many words can I write around people? I used to spend a lot of time at the philosophy school at University of Utah, Michigan State, and some other places. And I would never forget what I used to think when people would come to talk to some authors that would come to the university to speak to them. And they would always apologize if they didn't understand. So if you have a question, you didn't understand a passage of the book, you first say, you know, I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask about blah, blah, blah. It should be the other way around. If I'm writing, you should dig it. And if you don't, I'm probably not writing it well. If we writing stuff, we're talking about stuff, and it's not hip hop, if it don't make sense, it's obtuse, it's pompous, you know.
And sign me up for that EP. Sign me up.
Yeah, right. We need to work on that.
But that's interesting you bring that up, because I was thinking about, like, you know, the structure of the government, and a lot of things have been in place for a very long time, like generations. And we look at, you know, the way technology progresses, iPhones, computers, we get updates every month, it seems like. What is it that's in place, and what department is responsible for doing that for the government? Like, who's updating these policies? Who's taking in the information and being like, okay, this is outdated, we need to adjust this, we need to change this? Like, what is that? What does that look like? Or does it even exist?
Yeah, no, well, that responsibility is really on the elected officials. So they really have to do two jobs. They have to run and be likable or popular enough, which is more, it feels more like marketing, to get elected, right? So they have to run and get elected. But then after they're elected, hopefully the reason they're being elected is because their people from their area believe that they have the potential to change a lot, right? So like, for instance, when Bernie Sanders ran, and then, you know, he lost in 2016, but we won a lot of progressive seats in 2018. A lot of people were going to Congress with the charge of establishing healthcare for all and a Green New Deal and things like that. So they were updated policies. The problem is there's usually a tug of war between conservatives who don't want anything to change. I'm not trashing them. I should say real quick, you know, conservatism inherently means you are protectionist or want to protect what exists, and you don't want to change anything because you're comfortable, right? And you think the world should try to get to your level of comfort or do whatever it is you do to be comfortable. It's a ridiculous claim, but it is also a check on our ability to, you know, run radically into the future without questioning ourselves. But at this point, conservatism has run amok. So there are people on both sides of the aisle, and then some people in the middle even, who disagree about what should be updated. So every update to how the government works is really a war of power. And that's why we have to participate, really. I mean, yeah. So it's their responsibility to do that. And then you have governmental departments that are controlled by the executive branch, by the president. So let's say a law fails to change over time, a president could come and make an executive order, and they could go to, any department, pick any department you like, whether it be, the Department of Defense or the Department of Education,
HUD,
and they could just
Housing
change
and Urban Development.
totally, right? So they could go and say, I want to put a bunch of money in the NYCHA, right? Because it's necessary. Not that this president would do that, right? But they would have that ability to control those budgets. And now Congress, if Congress disagreed, people like the office that I'm running for, then they could step in and say, we're going to make it illegal for you to spend it that way. So there's always sort of a war of contracts between what the legislative body can do and what the executive branch can do. But they both have the potential to do workarounds on the other. The thing is, it's a lot easier for the executive than it is for the legislative body, because the legislative body has to basically make a proposal of a change from a single person, a single elected official, and then it gets buy-in from more elected officials, and then it goes to the floor and is judged by everyone else. So sometimes, you might be the guy with the best idea in the room, but it might be best strategy to give it to somebody else and let them bring it forward because people don't like you.
Or you don't have enough power to persuade.
Well, right, you don't have enough power. Yeah. You're new, or people think you're consuming too much power too fast. It's just like, I would look at politics like an elementary school playground. And usually the kids who run the playground, they probably going to become good executives or good politicians. There's a little bit of crazy, a little bit of sociopathy involved there. But I would look at it like that. You got people on both sides of the playground, some who like each other, some who don't. And sometimes people will say no just because that girl they didn't like proposed to change. And they're like, screw her, we should beat her up. And then they do, they beat her up. And, when I was on the playground, we had those gravel playgrounds. So, you would come back looking,
looking a
rocky
little
face.
like you dragged, you got dragged.
Literally, like, so, I mean, it really is like that. It's a bunch of people in there. These people are not pals. They come from different neighborhoods. Someone was talking to me about AOC the other week, and I like AOC. I like her enough. And he was like, yeah, you want to go to Congress and do this and that with AOC? I was like, I'm from Harlem. She's from Queens. That's nice.
Like, here come the shade. Here it come. You feel it coming on? You feel it? Because I do. Yeah. All right.
Like, that's good. Cute. That's cool.
I have 700,000 people that I interact with just in this neighborhood alone. So it's hard to be like, I'm going to go be cool up there. Just like whatever she's doing, if we can collaborate, sweet.
Yeah.
But I'm really just checking for the people in Harlem, the Heights, Inwood, Kingsbridge, Marble Hill, because that's all I can right now.
You got to start at home. Yeah, you got to start at home. All right, we got about 5 minutes left. PZ, what you got? You got another question?
I actually do have another question. I was actually going to just really piggyback off of the march you're going to do for George Floyd.
Yeah.
And with the uprising being at such a fever pitch now, what do you hope we can really accomplish in the wake of all these protests and all of this fervor that's happening out here?
A few things. I think what we're going to talk about at the march tomorrow is, and what we hope that other marchers will talk about across the country, is adding more transparency to policing, number one. So we want to repeal state laws like 50A here in New York. That's number one. Then we want to add new laws that make it really illegal for cops to ignore claims of distress from detained people, right? So if you say you can't breathe and the cop isn't calling EMS, it's a problem. So we have a series of laws called the Andrew Kearse Act that at least I'm proposing, and a bunch of other people are proposing to change that. But more broadly than those policy changes, I hope it's a real wake-up moment. Like when I look outside, I see people, they don't always know what to do. I've got a lot of texts and emails from Asian people and white people and you name it. And they're like, how do I help? And so everyone seeing George Floyd be murdered the way he was has has been up in arms. And so I think the real next step that we have outside of some policy changes that we absolutely need will be a time where we start to recognize our original sin, which is sort of ingrained, designed in, entrenched racism. One other thing that I think is cool that will get accomplished is I think a lot of the Confederate statues will start to come down because they think they're going to be vandalized. And I think mayors will use it as an excuse not to put them back up. And we saw some of that happen in Virginia. I don't know if you all saw that.
Yeah.
So yep. I think really those three things, right? It's new policies. It's an overall consensus from Americans that the racist folks in charge have been corrupt. And last, that our places, our communities start to look different. You know, this has given us the opportunity to say when we cry racism, we're not just, you know, crying wolf.
Yeah.
And now we expect something to be done about it. And people are being held accountable for it. So I think it's good. I think it would be a problem if we rush to heal too fast. And I was talking about that earlier this morning with a bunch of people. You know, we're in the middle of a surgery right now. We got open wounds. We want to put the bone in place, clear the cancer. We have to do that first before we go into healing. You know, we don't need to rush to do that. Mm-hmm. So I'm not ready to heal just yet. I'm not gonna burn nothing down either. Not up here, not above 96th Street. But and we not having it, like we're gonna let folks know what's what.
Yeah.
But we are gonna be out in the streets, you know, and we're gonna be out in the streets, and our precinct captains are gonna be out there with us, because I hit them up like, you need to come see this, you know.
There you have it, the Herbal Tea Lounge. Oh man, thank you to our special guest, Mr. JFK, if you didn't know, for joining us on the first episode of the Herbal Tea Lounge. It most certainly won't be the last. It's your man EarthTone.
And your man, the real Peasy.
Is there anything you want to tell the people before we get up out of here?
Sure. I would say, so we're starting this Keith Institute to carry all the work forward, whether it be from an economic standpoint, a political standpoint, a social or technological standpoint. So I would just ask everyone, if they want to know more, go to jamesfeltonkeith.com or go to keithinstitute.com. It'll all take you to the same place. And, you know, link up with us there. We'll be doing a lot, not only here locally, but we'll be doing some interesting things in the EU and Asia in the coming months.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, there you have it. You got the information. Go check that out. Let your voice be heard. Positive actions out there. Everybody be safe, be smart.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Peasy, you got anything for the people?
Hashtag we owe us. Hashtag we owe us. That's
we most
what
certainly
it is.
do. We most certainly do.
Yeah.
And we appreciate y'all joining us, man. Happy Pride. Go out there, celebrate, show your colors, wave that flag.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
In the marches, throw it in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And appreciate y'all tuning in, man. Again, this is the Herbal Tea Podcast with your boy EarthTone and Peasy. Shout out to you, JFK. And everybody be safe out there, man. Thank you for tuning in. Peace.
That from coast to coast, where there's dope, there's hope, where there's dope, there's hope. Sheesh. Wait, is it lit?